Okay, so I wanted to talk about the start of UK dance, how that came about, why we did it. I from memory, it was really so we had control over how we put out our music. When we put it out, because we weren't the quickest at producing, we'd take... It was really frustrating, actually, because everyone would go, I've done 14 tracks yesterday.
I know.
It was like, we've done one in 2 months.
Yeah.
And, but I guess, I don't know why it took us so long. I don't know whether we was just slow at it or would just... I often remember, right, being sat there making a track and never being able to finish the bloody thing.
Yeah.
Because we're just going back and, oh, yeah, it's just that little tweak, or we just add this or take that out. And
Yeah.
do you have the same kind of memory of it?
I do, yeah, and that never goes away. And it's funny, actually, Mike Discala said to me, I remember him saying to me this once before, is that you just have to end up abandoning the track at some point, because otherwise you can literally just keep going over it, keep going, you overthink it and you sort of get to that point. But yeah, I do remember that. I do remember a lot of people saying we'd go down to get the dubs cut, wouldn't we? Go and get some dub plates. And we'd go down there with like 1 or 2 tracks, and other people would go down there with like 10 different tunes. And they'd be like, what have you been doing?
They kind of felt shortchanged, didn't they? When we was taking all these dub plates and they were like going out with their measly 2.
Yeah, exactly.
But I remember, obviously, the studio when we first started producing those Force and Styles was in my back room at the house.
Yep.
At my house. And that's kind of, we'd been producing there with Bert and Hozzy as well, doing Evolution stuff for some time. So we just kind of lived in there. We was used to how it sounded and everything else. So that was our little home for making music. So those first tracks, obviously we were still very much sample based.
Yeah.
In those initial days.
Yeah.
But a lot more fall to the floor. And do you remember when we, I'm trying to get this the right way around. So All Over, I don't know if it was All Over or the remix. Do you remember when we finished it and then accidentally turned off the Atari and lost it?
No, I don't remember that at all. No.
We had to remake the whole thing from scratch.
Right.
Because
that is a killer.
Literally, because we just left the machine on a thing. We hadn't really saved anything.
No.
Or there's something went wrong. But anyway, I mean, these days, it's a lot more difficult to lose stuff.
Well, even if you think about it, with the desk that we used to use back then, and this was obviously the same for everyone at that point, is that you would make a track, and it's not like you could just, like these days, you can just get halfway through a tune and you can think to yourself, do you know what, this isn't working, I'll come back to this one and I'll get on with something else. Whereas then the mixing desk was set to all the levels of that particular track you were working on.
Yeah.
So if you had to be sure you were happy with that mix down when you actually recorded the final version for the master.
You were never getting it back again, were you?
Because you're never getting it back again.
No.
And actually, again, that's a few mistakes we made along the way, is that when we were making the tune, it sounded raw and the mix down was sounding good.
I was going to say this, yeah.
And then we got to a point where sometimes we'd take it off when it was sounding like that and it would sound fantastic. But we'd then wipe the mix, pull all the levels down and start again, start being all sort of, intricate with it all. And then you just lose all the rawness of the record.
It's weird, isn't it? Because you've kind of been living with it, in our case, for 2 weeks. And then it's kind of what the slate clean and start again.
Why would we have ever done that? It's just when you think back, you think to yourself, why would you do that? It's like, it sounds good, let's just tweak it how it is.
Yeah.
But you'd start from. I remember seeing you pulling them all down and then moving all the levels, like literally thinking, oh wow,
am I getting the blame for this?
No, because that's what we did. Because it was a case of we need to. This is what we need to do. This is what people do. And then it wasn't till afterwards that you'd think, that doesn't quite sound as good as it did.
Yeah. Funny enough, I remember, because the days were so early and we honestly didn't have a clue what we was doing, really.
Yeah.
You're just kind of winging it the whole time.
Yeah.
but you'd read a book and someone had said, literally start from scratch.
Yeah.
And then you freshen up your ears, start from scratch. It will sound amazing.
Yeah.
Rarely did.
No.
Which is,
and that's the beauty of sort of hindsight, isn't it? Because that is why some of the best music is made by the youngsters these days, because it's the rawness and actually it's the not knowing how to completely use a compressor and this, that and the other, because sometimes they just squash the life out of things and ruin the actual rawness of the record.
well, we'll get onto that later because,
That is what happened.
We definitely had that issue.
Yeah.
And if you remember back in those early days, I remember this vividly. I don't think when we had an analog desk, we ever took EQ off of anything. We only added EQ.
Yeah.
So there was no, we'll just take, this amount off the bass to let the kick breathe a little bit.
No.
Nah, none of that.
No.
It's just like, we'll turn it up that much. That sounds good.
Yeah.
And that's all it was. Mm-hmm. And so there wasn't, and obviously in those, we didn't have compressors. And in those very early days, we definitely didn't have compressors. And looking back, there wasn't a great deal wrong with any of those mixes, was there?
No.
It's madness.
Yeah, and don't forget as well, most of the things we were using, samples, like kick drums, snares and everything, most of them were sampled off other records in the first
Which had already
place,
been compressed,
which had already
been mastered, and everything.
been through mastering and everything. So you didn't really need anything else doing to it.
Yeah. So out of those early tracks, I mean, I guess the first 4 or 5 up until maybe Harmony and Frankie's lead. Mm-hmm. What was your favourite, or what was your memories of making those tracks?
I think my main memories is actually what came after, when we had them on test press, because I remember us going to certain gigs. I think United Dance was one in particular where, again, this is obviously at the early stages of the career where we didn't really know everyone particularly well. And we would go up to Vinyl Groover or go up to Clarkey, and you just go up to everyone with their own test presses.
Yeah, maybe not Clarkey.
Maybe not Clarkey.
Maybe
though, 'cause
not
he was a bit
Clarkey. I
tougher at the time,
don't
wasn't
think
he?
Clarkey would have played.
No, he
We've
probably
got a
wouldn't,
story
would he?
about Clarkey for later on, though, so we'll save that one for later.
But that was a big memory of actually walking into these places with the record bags, not even DJing that night actually, and just walking in up to giving these people the test presses.
It was. I mean, that the whole process, because that's kind of been taken away now, because the fact that our tunes took 2 weeks to make, maybe even longer sometimes. Mm-hmm. These days, that tune is out of date before you've even finished it.
Yeah,
which is the mad thing.
Yeah.
Whereas back then, it was like, okay, we'll spend 2-3 weeks on making it, and then we'll get it cut on dub, and it'll be on dub for 4 or 5 months, and then we'll get some test pressings done, and then we'll release it.
Yeah.
So a tune would have a life cycle of a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quite easily.
Yeah. But again, it was all the different methods of building that tune over that time to make people excited for the release.
Yeah.
Whereas in today's market, it's a case of you finished it today, it's up on TikTok, it's up on all the social media, and everyone who follows you knows the record exists, and then everyone wants it.
Yeah. I mean, but the funny thing is, there's pros and cons about that, because obviously getting people to hear a tune these days is so much easier. But it just that kind of, I should call it organicness about it. I mean, that whole process.
Yeah.
From back in those days, there's something beautiful about that. At the same time,
I think you hit the nail on the head. It was an organic process. There was nothing contrived about it, was there?
No.
The only part was once you finished it, you gave a handful of DJs that promo or the dub plate, and in the hope that they might play it out to wherever they're playing, and get it building. And I suppose the other sort of vehicle for that was all the tape packs, because obviously there was a lot of tape packs around of all the gigs at the time, so that's where people heard records in certain sets, and you'd literally then go into your record shop, wouldn't you, and say, I've heard this track, and you'd hum it and sing it, and then they'd say, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And then,
but in the same breath, it was also so much easier to get your tune to the 7-8 biggest DJs in the country.
Yeah.
Because you'd be sat in a room with them and go, have a listen to this.
Yeah,
do you want to take it? And
it was a smaller scene, wasn't it?
It was a smaller scene, but still the biggest scene at the time, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that just shows how much dance music has expanded across the world, because it's just unrecognisable now.
Yeah.
From what it was.
Yeah.
So I guess things really started to happen for us with Heart of Gold.
Yeah, that was the real catalyst, wasn't it, for us?
Yeah, and obviously Jenna was a massive part of that, and we'd been. Jen was obviously on Wonderland and Shining Down first off.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what made Heart of Gold different, because it sounds, the production, maybe the kick. We started because I think there was a different kick in
The heavier kick.
slightly heavier kick, and the song was, I mean, even though it's not a traditional song in the sense of verse chorus, because it is really a chorus. Maybe it's a verse. Don't even know what it is, to be honest with you.
Well, I think that's it. I think there was a different. It was a different formula. It was different to. I mean, we didn't know we had something that special, did we?
No.
It was a different formula at the time, and I think that's probably what sort of connected. We always think. I think that you're trying to make something that people are going to want, but actually it's the opposite. People don't know what they want until they hear something, and it connects.
I think I think strongly that the most important thing about those days as well is we weren't trying to make anything to please anyone apart from people on the dance floor.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, okay, we need to make a track that this record label's going to like, or to achieve this. It's just what we loved. And the only thought in our minds was what's going to happen when that beat drops or when that piano comes in on the dance floor. That's the only thing we cared about at the time.
Yeah.
And I think it makes a massive difference. I don't know your process these days with making tracks, whether you think similarly. I've heard you talking about the effects of something happening on a dance floor when this happens in a track, so I guess you probably still do.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it has to be dance floor related.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to then, it was again we were in a world of sort of firsts, weren't we?
Yes.
So it was a different process.
And I think we very much, from what I remember, wanted to use non-sampled vocals.
Yeah.
We've definitely gone down that route, and that's why Jen come on board. And it just so happened that she lived around the corner from me at the time.
And also,
anyway.
I think at that point, there wasn't any other songs around which were such a full song.
No.
Like you say, isn't that particular track isn't necessarily like a verse bridge chorus or anything, but it's still quite a long vocal.
Yes.
In comparison to what was happening at the time. So around about that time, there was just lots of hooks, like a little hook.
It was a hook, yeah.
And that's really what was happening. Whereas that turned it into a bit more of a love song over a harder beat, which wasn't really a thing back then.
No, it wasn't. But I mean, obviously, only a few years prior to that, when you kind of got, I suppose, late 80s, early 90s, with all the big piano house stuff at the time, that was very much full vocal. And I think because we both loved that era.
Yeah.
Of music, and it's kind of harping back to that a little bit and
Yeah.
trying to bring some of that back into it. What did Junior used to call it? Happy House.
Yeah.
He always used to call it Happy House. I think he even called hardcore Happy House at a time for a while, didn't he? But talking of which, I guess Pretty Green Eyes was close after Heart of Gold.
Yeah.
And that really kind of pulled down any barriers, really, didn't it? Because you'll remember this vividly, and we've spoken about this before, is when we made that track, because it was a male vocal and no one had done that before, certainly not a hardcore, and we'd finished the track and it was Dougal's 21st, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we was all going up to Milton Keynes.
Yeah, to go-karting.
Go-karting. And there was, Slipmat was there, Seduction, his full name this time, John. Seduction was there. Ramos and Supreme were there. Was Scotty Vinyl Groove there?
I think probably was.
I'm trying to remember. Hixie was
there.
there as well.
Should we just point out who won that day, though? That's quite an integral point in this conversation, I feel.
You were the lightest. You were so.
I was actually.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
You was light. You was young. You was fearless.
I was.
So I do remember afterwards, and I think it was literally in the car park of the go-karting place, and we said to the lads, we've got this, kind of done this track, and don't know if you're going to like it or not, because that's the way you always start the conversation. Don't know if you're going to like it, but have a listen. And I've detailed this in some of the text in the album. That everyone was kind of huddled around the car. I think it was my Calibra at the time, because I think every DJ had a Calibra at the time. And we kind of played it, and everyone was silent. And when everyone's silent, you don't really know what anyone's thinking. and then Junior's vocal had come in and literally finished, and everyone's looked at each other and went, fucking hell, that is amazing.
Yeah.
And that was a moment. A tear to my eye now. But I mean, that moment in itself, to get the appreciation from those guys who were all gods to us.
Yeah.
And that was a really special moment, I think.
That was. But again, I guess without us realising at the time, we just made something that hadn't been made before. Like a male vocal, a love song over a hard beat.
Oh, that should never have worked.
It should never have worked.
That should never work. And, you know, props to Jay for that, because he was like, yeah, this will sound good.
Yeah.
And just give it a go.
Absolutely.
And it was. I think the great thing about it is when you play something like that in an arena that has similar music playing all night, and then that male vocal comes, everyone's going to stand up and listen to that.
It was something different, wasn't it?
It was something different. And, you know, it's gone on to be one of the biggest dance tracks of all time in, you know, various guises.
Yeah.
But Jay's voice on that was just, well, on everything he did, really, was just amazing. And then, obviously, with Pacific Sun, we'd started that prior to going to Australia and doing an Australia tour. And I think it was, did we originally call it Lullaby? Or, you know, it was, I don't know if it was called Lullaby at any point.
I don't think it was at that point.
No?
No, I think it was just after.
But I do recall just coming back and we having this track and just calling it Pacific Sun, just off the basis of being to Australia for 3 weeks and having the most amazing tour. And it was just kind of homage to the Australia tour, really. And it's hard to tell sometimes. I know Pretty Green Eyes has been our biggest ever track, but Pacific Sun is, I think, one of my faves.
That's probably one of my favourites as well, because, to be honest,
it's kind of gutting that vocal's never done more. I think might strive to push it to do a bit more, because that's a hit record.
Yeah, I think it was the magic of the whole combination, wasn't it, of that song, and then when that vocal comes in, it's just something special.
One of the things I did want to mention was the fact that we'd have a lot of musical intros and not beat intros.
Which again was different at that point, wasn't it?
Which was different, but do you remember the reason that we did it?
No, I don't actually.
You don't?
No.
Oh, it's old brains here, mate.
Go on.
That's what it is. So I kind of come up with the theory that if people couldn't mix it, they'd either have to play it at the beginning or the end of the set. And the most memorable two tracks in the set is the one at the beginning or the one at the end.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the theory behind it, and it kind of worked.
Yeah.
But I just made.
That was the perfect set starter as well, that, for us, wasn't it?
Well, it still is.
Yeah.
You know, I even get, if I get booked these days, I even get requested, can you start with Pacific Sun?
Yeah.
Because it's just, well, it's a great record all round, really. And then you got, obviously, Field of Dreams and Follow Me were the other two big Gen tracks, which I just love Follow Me. There's something about Follow Me. The lyrics are a little bit naughty in places if you listen to them carefully, because it's just about raving and having a lovely time. Probably too much of a lovely time.
It was relevant.
It was relevant, yeah. But that string breakdown and that build up, that's just insane.
Yeah.
That was just awesome. Just even the whole of that track. We could say that about all of them, because they got so much meaning.
Yeah. And I think, we were just in that moment, weren't we, where we were sort of, for want of a better word, everything at that point was kind of, everything we touched turned to gold, didn't it? We didn't go into the studio saying, we need to make a tune that's bigger than the last one. We'd just go in and make something.
Make a tune.
And if Junior was there, it would come together. And if Jenna was there, it would come together. And we were just in that that patch of making those records.
I think we just got really lucky because I think there, like you say, there was a period of time, and even though if you look at the list, there's not that many of them, but it's because we just spent so much time trying to make it as good as we possibly could.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd change that for 1 minute.
No,
because
absolutely.
I'd rather have that list of tracks there, which have so many great memories and were so successful, than a list of 50 where you got a handful of that are really, really good. I don't know. It's that's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah.
But one of the funny stories is Paradise and Dreams, and so do you remember what happened with Paradise and Dreams?
I mean,
I know your memory's a bit dodgy.
My memory is a bit sketchy about.
You missed a clean living.
I know.
It's all the travel.
I know. I think it was those early days. Yeah, my memory is sketchy of all of that. I think it's because I was younger and there was so much going on. I wasn't prepared for it.
Yeah, possibly.
I think that's honestly because I've thought about it over the years, and those times is, you know, bear in mind that the kids of today, I guess, when they're making music, they're making it thinking, I want to be that guy who's up there DJing, and that's where it's going to take me. Whereas that wasn't necessarily what I was thinking when I was sort of 17, 18, making those tunes in your back room. And then suddenly we were thrust out onto the road and getting planes and going here. I was completely out of my comfort zone. And
yeah, you struggled for a little while.
I did struggle, yeah, and I was homesick, and it wasn't something that I saw coming really, and I had to it took me a while to kind of get used to it and find my feet with that. And I think that's part of it with me, actually, with that side of it.
Yeah, I remember vividly that you really struggled with like being away from home and stuff like that. But being so young, it's only natural that that's going to happen. But the one thing I wanted to mention about Paradise and Dreams and the way that came about is Junior was around mine. We were playing FIFA, and I think he kind of put a piano line together because he'd come round and go, "Oh, should we do some writing?" And you put a piano line down, and he'd sat in the studio and we was playing FIFA in my lounge, and he'd come running in. He goes, "Boys, I've got this," and I'm like, "Oh, Jay, we're in the middle of a game, mate. Come on, let's get the important things done first." And then he shouted out, "The rain pours down, but the sun." I was like, "Oh, hold on, we might pause this game a minute." And off we went
straight in, and that was
finished. Finished writing it together.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's again in various different guises, because I think probably Paradise and Dreams had more mixes by us than any of our tracks, isn't it? Because there was that original one.
Yeah.
We then did the remix, which went out on Diverse, and then we did the duet mix with Keelia.
Yeah.
So there's a few different versions of that. The duet one is just, we'll come on to Keelia a bit later, but there's different gravy that. So there's always kind of little stories and things like that about making tracks, particularly with Jay, because there was never a dull moment where Jay was about.
Oh my God, it was comedy. Do you know what, actually, we should touch on that as well, because when he used to sing in the studio, he didn't make it easy for us, did he?
No. No.
He didn't make it easy, but it was like comedy, but comedy gold. It was just brilliant, because he would do so many different takes, and each take would be different. Whereas usually you'd go in the studio and you'd kind of remember what you're singing, and he would just go off on tangents, and then we'd end up kind of having to chop bits and put it together to make the final cut, wouldn't we? But that again is probably what gave it so much magic, because he would come up with different angles and different ways of singing something each time he sung it, and you'd think, no, do it like that, Jay, do it like that, and then he'd do it like that, but then he'd do something wrong, but actually the way he did it wrong ended up being really good.
Well, funny enough, because I was going through a load of old DATs and trying to find old vocals, and there's lots of Junior sessions on there, and it's just you could lose yourself in a couple of hours just listening to him, because it's just hilarious. And
the best part was he'd try singing something like, "Sing me another idea. Watch the ride." Hold up, stop it, Stylesy, man. Stop having a go at me, man.
And then you could just hear the banter back and forth with us.
Yeah.
It's just, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's so funny. But we used to give him so much crap, but he'd take it as such a laugh.
Yeah.
And I think we got away with a lot then because he was a big lad.
He was a big lad. He didn't mess about, did he?
He didn't mess about. But we just
fists
had
of steel.
the fist of steel. Yeah, we'd have such laughs with him in the studio, and eventually come up with gold. And one of my favourites, just to finish on this section, really is Cutting Deep.
Yeah.
Because Cutting Deep was, strangely enough, it's kind of one of our later good tracks.
I would actually say it's probably our last, isn't it? Wasn't that the last one?
I think it could possibly have been.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to the kick, we just got away from using that same kick that we'd used in everything.
Yeah.
But it was the only time we used a different kick and got it right.
And it worked, yeah.
And so it's kind of more of a 909, just a normal 909.
Yeah, actually, funny enough, that kick wasn't a sample. That actually we sampled it, but it came off the Korg X5.
Yes. And
which is why it sounded more synthesized, I guess.
And another thing that we'll come on to later on is with the switch from analog to digital, is I remember that one of the things we did, because we were still on an analog desk when we did Cutting Deep, is we just redlined the gain for that kick.
Yeah.
And which you just couldn't do the same on a digital desk.
No.
It just wasn't possible. I know you can now get plugins that will distort things and stuff like that, but that sound that you get just by redlining it, did the same in Field of Dreams with the big sound in the middle. If anyone heard that sound prior to redlining it on the desk, it was just a
puny
little beep,
yeah,
beep, and then you distort the hell out of it and come up with some gold. So, but yeah, it's just a little. I mean, have you got any bits and pieces you want to add to kind of the tracks and those initial UK dance days and any other memories that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's just so many, but I would say that Pretty Green Eyes is probably my standout moment from when all the tunes came together, because we were still, like I say, we were in your back room in your house, and it was organic. It was the first thing that we'd done with the male vocal, first real thing we'd done with Junior. And then, like you say, when we played it to the guys and we knew we had something, that was, I think that was a big turning point, I think, for me.
But there was we did move studios kind of soon after that, didn't we?
Yeah.
Because we went up to the Essex Enterprise Centre. We got out of the house, wanted somewhere to go to record, and we'd got in this room that we'd rented out because we was there for 3 years. That was the maximum that we could stay there, was 3 years, and I believe that was 97 to 2000, possibly, or 96 to 99.
Yeah, that was it.
And we thought it was a great idea to put carpet on all the walls.
Yeah.
To deaden the sound.
Mental.
And we kind of we went a bit too far there, didn't we?
Yeah, literally all the and the ceiling, wasn't it?
Literally seated, floor, walls, everything was covered in carpet. My dad had built this big kind of rack stand, which was amazing, but we couldn't really sit anywhere in front of the computer because it was just rack gear. We didn't really think about it too well, did we? But
we still made some bangers up there.
Because Follow Me was there, Pacific Sun was there, Cutting Deep was there. But that was a big transition, going from a back room with no soundproof. Actually, there was a little bit of acoustic foam, wasn't there?
There was some curtains. We had some curtains up.
Some curtains up. But that was a big change going to the other room. We really quite struggled because everything just sounded dull.
Yeah,
because there was so
much
much
difference,
carpet.
wasn't it?
It was having to brighten up everything. Anyway, that was a complete nightmare.
Do you remember those